for having me. Cohasset. Woo! Day after St. Patrick's Day, too. I'm hungover.
So Mike is a multi-option screenwriter, author, and playwright, and his work has been recognized internationally in the Academy Nichol Fellowship, Page, Screencraft, New York and Los Angeles screenplay competitions. His midlife crisis writing career began when all of his children and all of his money went off to college.
Yes. Yep, that you stole my line. You know the feeling.
He's a graduate of Providence College and Boston College High School. He resides on Cape Cod with his wife, Michelle, and he spends his summers losing to someone twice his age in pickleball, and his winters aimlessly roaming the aisles of Home Depot.
Yes, thank you for finding me. Oh my gosh, thank you. Thank you, what a great, thank you so much. Hello, Cohasset. Actually, Patty, I wanted to thank you. I saw this in your listing, and this picture of me is like 20 years old. I love it. This is going to be that dark hair. What happened to that guy? I ate that guy 10 years ago. So thank you, Cohasset. Thank you, Cohasset. Thank you, Cohasset. I really appreciate it. I love kind of talking about my stories. And I know the focus will be on garlic and Gaelic, but what I thought I would do is kind of tell you my journey of writing. There's all a theme. They're all kind of Boston-based. You're going to get a real sense of strong Irish women in this theme. So in any event, I grew up in Watertown, and I went to BC High in Dorchester, because I think my mother wanted to get as much Catholic guilt in me as possible. Actually, I went to St. Luke's for first grade, which is a little Catholic school in Watertown, and it closed. That was like in 1965 when they were closing. And my mother blames me for the closing of all the Catholic schools. I'm like, Mom, take it easy. So I went to BC High in Dorchester, and that was where I really got my affinity and love for those neighborhoods, the triple-decker houses. You know, all my friends from high school still are close, from Dorchester, Southie, Charlestown, Quincy. I would hang out with them, and I just loved those tight-knit communities. Everybody knows everybody. They'll take a bullet for you. The mothers were tough. The fathers were tougher. Actually, I should say it the other way. The fathers were tough. The mothers were tougher. What happened, as Patty said, I turned 50, and all my kids and all my money went off to college. So I was sitting in the house, and I had a friend. Actually, he's from Cohasset, a friend from BC High, who has written movies. His name is Ned Crowley. His mother's Nelson Beveridge was his stepdad. He wrote movies, and he kind of gave me the bug to write screenplays. So he's like, you can do it. And a screenplay was a great way to kind of do a format, right? It's really structured. A screenplay has to be like 90 to 110 pages. This has to happen by page 10. This has to happen by page 20. So I started writing screenplays, and I actually sold a couple, which really pissed my friend Ned off, who had been struggling in Hollywood for years, but I kind of got lucky. But because it's so structured, and once you kind of sell your screenplay, you kind of give your baby up, so you never know what's going to happen. So I decided I wanted to create books, because I can get it to a wider audience. I can go to Cohasset Senior Center and talk about my stories. But I needed the inspiration. I'm always kind of dry, like what's going to happen. So the first book I wrote, which you're reading Fisherman's View. So I was out of inspiration. I had already sold a couple screenplays. And so one day I was reading the Boston Globe, and I see this headline in the obituaries, because we all read the obituary. We're at the age that we read the Irish sports page, right? So I see this headline, and it says, Irishman dies from stubbornness and whiskey. And I go, this is my guy. This is my guy. So I'll read you, this was a true obituary. The guy was from Quincy. I'll read you parts of his obituary. It was beautiful. I wish I could write this good. So it says, Chris Connors died at age 67 after trying to box his bikini-clad hospice nurse just moments earlier. Ladies' man, game slayer, and outlaw, Connors told his last inappropriate joke on Friday, December 9th, that which cannot be printed here. Anyone else fighting stage 4 pancreatic cancer would have gone quietly into the night, but Connors was drinking champagne in a house full of friends and family as Al Green blared from the speakers. Most people thought he was crazy for swimming in the ocean in January, or for being a skinny Irish Golden Gloves boxer from Quincy, Mass., and for dressing up as a priest and then proceeding to get into a fight in a Jewish deli. People knew hanging out with him would end in a night in jail or a killer screwdriver hangover. Throughout his life, he was an accomplished hunter, singer, and birth control device tester. Some notable failures: Caitlin, Chris, and Liam. Absolute Vodka and Simply Orange Juice companies are devastated by the loss. In lieu of flowers, please pay someone's bar tab. So I read that and I go, I've got my guy. What I learned in writing, and I'm sure it's the same for anyone who's reading stories, the characters have to be interesting. You have to really be involved, or you have to really be invested. You have to really like them and kind of hope they fall in love at the end, or you have to really hate them and hope they die in a fiery crash very soon, page 10. So I read that and I go, I got my guy. So this was the only book that was based not in Boston. I wanted to go deeper into the Irish roots. I have my guy. He's kind of a rascal old man. He comes back to visit his family. And it's a story of family. It's a story of how I'm one of 3. And I'm so different from my brother and sister. We're all very different. And it's how you're brought up in the same house, but you're all so different. But when there's tragedy or happiness, you come back together as a family. So I set it in Brooklyn, New York, Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, which is a real Irish town. And the story behind this, as well as this gentleman, is anyone familiar with the Verrazano Bridge? So the Verrazano Bridge goes from Staten Island to Brooklyn, and it's huge. It's enormous. So I have 3 children, and my wife's from New York. So we're in New York. My oldest daughter was driving up for Thanksgiving. She calls me from New Jersey. She's like, Dad, I can't do it. I can't drive over the bridge. I'm terrified. I said, oh, shit. So, all right, sorry, Cable. So I said, all right, Ryan, her boyfriend at the time, now her husband, I go, we got to go get Lindsay. So we get in the car, we drive over the Verrazano, which is enormous, get to the other side, find this little park in Staten Island. There's Lindsay. She's lying on the ground, meditating, looking up at the dinosaur of a bridge. And so I lie down next to her, and I said, and she goes, Dad, I'm sorry, I couldn't do it. And I look at her, and I go, Lindsay, that's fine, but this is going to make a great scene in the book. She said, and I tell you that because anyone I meet, everyone in my circle, you're going to be in a book. So Cohasset, you're going to be in the next book. You know, anytime I'm with someone, I have them write a waiver, like I may or may not be in the story. My sister read this. She's like, I can't believe you put that in the story. I said, I changed your name a little bit. So this was the first book. It allowed me to really dig deeper into the characters. And I changed his name to Mickalene. He's Mickalene Fitzgerald in this story. So I came back to Boston. Once I read this Irish obituary, I'm like, I've got a thread of strong Irish relatives and friends and family. I got to write about them. So I called it my Irish trilogy. And I have 3 books the 3 of them are based. One is in Dorchester, one's in Southie, one's in Charlestown. There's a lot of parts of Boston that are Irish. I mean, Rosendale, Hyde Park, West Roxbury, all of Boston, all of Massachusetts. Yesterday, all of Massachusetts was Irish, right? That's why I don't have any green. I wore it all yesterday. So I went to the town I knew best was Dorchester. So I wrote this story, and again, it's all based on people I know. So please sign the waiver. You may all be in it. I might be able to get you in the movie too. So this is a story called Crossing the Sagamore, and it's loosely based on a true story. I was out with a friend of mine. It's a story of friendships, tight friendships, the people you knew growing up. are just the closest you'll ever have. You may not see them for 10 years, 20 years, but when you get back together, it's so comfortable. You laugh at the same jokes, you share the same stories. There's a level of comfort and love that you just don't have with everybody else. It's just different. So I was out with my friend, and he tells me about his cousin. True story. He's from Dorchester. He was in Cleveland, Ohio, and he had had a drug problem, and he died of an overdose. So all his buddies from Dorchester got in a car, drove out to Cleveland, got his body, had him cremated, then took the ashes and drove them back to Boston. And along the way, they stopped at bars. They'd sprinkle some ashes at the bar. They got thrown in jail. They got arrested. They got in a car accident. And I was like, oh, God, I got to write. This is a great story. So I wrote Crossing the Sagamore. That's the road trip story. And it's really about how, sort of the road trip of life, of how all these guys changed. It's their buddies in high school, but now it's 10 years later or 20 years later. They got to come back for this funeral. He always wanted to be buried on Cape Cod. So I have this beautiful kind of, did you finish it? Yeah. Okay, so you know the ending, and I don't want to give it away. But I wanted that end scene, where they finally put him in his final resting place. And the wish he always wanted was for them just to be together again, for all their friends to be together. So I sold this to Hollywoood. My kids were like, woo, when are we moving to California? I was like, don't butter your popcorn just yet, kids. And you just keep writing. And what happens is you sell it to California. You never know what's going to happen. If it gets made, great. This was at a time when, not at the same time, but everybody, Goodwill Hunting. It's got a Goodwill Hunting feel, Mystic River, just because those are just really popular Boston movies. So I had to keep writing. I continued to keep writing. I'm this type that when I'm done with a story, I think the tank is empty, right? I'm like, I got nothing else. So, as I said, I grew up in Watertown, went to BC High. My wife and I raised our family in Medfield, which is out by Westwood and Dedham. So I think it was 1999, we bought the house, and my next door neighbor is out there raking his lawn. And at the time, he's probably 75, 76, and he's raking the yard. So I go out to introduce myself to him. And I go, I'm Mike Bernard, I just bought the house next door. He says, I'm Don Hayes. And he's wearing a United States Marine Corps t-shirt. So I look at him, I said, oh, you used to be a Marine. Oh, that was you don't say that to a Marine. He dropped that rake and he said, I didn't used to be a Marine, I am a Marine. And I go, I got my next book. I go, this is my guy. So Don Hayes, USMC, retired. Awesome. He lives in Walpole now. So one day, and he is a true Semper Fi. Every November, he's got the Marine dress blues on for the November 12th birthday of the Marine Corps. He is tight with all his old Marine Corps buddies. So one day, I'm looking out the window in Medfield. It's snowing. Don Hayes is jogging down the street. He's got a leather weight belt wrapped around his waist, like a big leather workout belt. He's got a chain attached to the back, dragging off the back, and attached to the chain is a car tire. And he's dragging the tire as he jogs up the street in the snow. And I'm like, if that's not a book, this is the opening scene in a movie. So I got Don Hayes, his name in the book is Jackie Boy. I go, Jackie Boy Hayes. Awesome. Diagonally across the street was another neighbor, Amanda. Now, Amanda Hayes met her husband at Paul Newman's hole-in-the-wall camp for children with cancer, terminal cancer. She works at Dana-Farber for children with terminal cancer. She's a hospice nurse. So I'm like, for her alone, I go, how do you get through a day? Like, this is amazing. They're just angels on earth. So I brought them over one night, and I go, all right, guys, I'm writing a book about you. You're going to be father and daughter. I'm going to put you in Southie, because nothing cool ever happens in Medfield. So I'm like, you're going to Southie. We're going to put you in a double-decker. So I wrote their story. I created the Crossing Guards, where I've got this retired Marine who thinks he's never going to die, with his daughter, who's a hospice nurse, who helps people die, who helps people cross over. And her big thing is she never wants anyone to die alone. So there's that relationship struggle. Again, I went into Southie with this. This is Castle Island. There's a reason they're wounded. So what was interesting was, so I sold this one. This has the best chance of being a movie. And so I've got a director involved and all this. And so I call Don Hayes and Amanda. I go, I have good news and bad news. The good news is we sold the movie. We sold the book. It's going to be a movie. So Don's like, great. So then I look at Amanda, I go, the bad news is you're going to have a really big drinking problem in this movie. She's like, of course I am. I go, well, of course you are. How do you get through the day without a drinking problem when you're in that line of business? So, that was an example of they're going to take it and make it their own. I trust they're going to do it well. Once a month, Don Hayes calls me. It's like, when are we going to Hollywood? I'm ready for the red carpet. He called me the night of the Oscars. He's like, it's getting tight, but I can fit it. But it's I know it's mine, but it's a really, really heartwarming story. I wanted it to be, it's dedicated to nurses. It's dedicated to hospice nurses, the people that just, know the end and really help the families with their struggle. And I wanted it as it's dedicated to the military. There's something about, all the armed services are great, but there's something about Marines. They've just got this Semper Fi. They poo-poo the rest of them. I've got a line in here that Don taught me. Page 1, what does it say in page 1 of the Army manual? Call a Marine. He loved it, right? Call a Marine. So Crossing Guards was my Southie story. And it's just a really nice story about father and daughter relationships, why they're struggling, why he's pulling a tire, what's the story behind his pain. And you'll recognize all the Boston themes. She goes to visit all her patients. They're in Jamaica Plain, they're in Quincy. So I kind of emptied the tank on Boston. So that was done. And I was like, okay, I got nothing. So then my son, so as I said, I have 3 kids. And my son is a musician. And he's been really honest. He's been really open about his struggles with mental health. I think all these kids struggle with anxiety. So he's gone to therapy, and he's very open about it. So I go, Tim, I'm going to write your story. And he's like, oh, shit. He's like, well, will you change the name? I'm like, yeah, it'll be Tim Devlin. No one will ever know. So I wrote his story. Again, I fictionalized it. And it's really about, it's a father-son relationship, about how we kind of struggle to communicate, how he uses music to calm his brain. I think all these kids are struggling with anxiety. So it's this musician that found his creative outlet and a way to deal with his anxiety. And then I have him going to therapy, and the therapist desperately needs therapy. So I really dug into her too. So I did his story. So then meanwhile, as I said, I got 3 kids. So I've got Lindsay at the Verrazano Bridge. I got Tim's book. So now my 3rd kid, Katie, she's scared to death because she knows the next book's coming right between her eyes. So she would call the house, and I'd be like, Kate, hey, what's new? Nothing, Dad. Nothing's new. I'm like, what'd you do this week? Nothing. You're not writing about me. I don't want to be in any of your books. I'm like, come on, Kate, give me something. So I tell you that. As the nice thing was I had my Dorchester, I had my Southie, and now I said, I got to get one more Irish book in me. So, is that my daughter? My daughter said, why are you using me in that story? I go, that's fine, that's fine. So, the story of Kate that got me to Gaelic and garlic. So, as I said, we were done. We were in Medfield. We sold our house during COVID, and apparently my wife told our children we moved and where we lived, so suddenly 2 of them moved back home with us. I was like, what the hell? You weren't supposed to give them our address. So Katie, 2 of my kids went to Assumption. 2 of my kids went to Loyola, and Katie went to Assumption in Worcester. And so Katie is graduating, and I meet her at the end of graduation, and she says, you know what, Dad, I think I want to be a nurse. And I'm like, you couldn't have thought of that 4 years ago? Like, why did I just spend? Okay, she wants to be a nurse. So Katie always struggled with her test-taking skills. She was a really good student, but she had anxiety about taking tests. It was not a great test taker. So we're like, all right, well, you know, we'll jump off that bridge when we come to it. So she went, she studied, she got this 18-month accelerated nursing program. Is anybody a nurse here? Okay, so when you're finished with nursing school, you have to take a test called the NCLEX, which is sort of like taking the boards if you were a lawyer. My wife and I knew this was going to be a big hurdle, but nobody tells Katie what to do. She's my one. She's my potato. So she struggled. She took a couple of classes over. She's just a grinder. Did it. She passed nursing school, but she still had to take the test. So we're at the Cape. The test is in Boston. The test is at 8 in the morning. Typical dad, I'm in the car at 5 a.m. That gives us plenty of time. They're not up. Now we're running late. Now, I know if we miss this test, Katie's not going to take it again. That's the kind of person she is. She goes, I'm going to do it, but if I don't do it, I'm going to take it as a sign. I'll do something else. I'm like, oh, okay. So we're driving up Route 3. I'm actually through Duxbury, and I'm trying to keep it light. Has anyone read Garlic and Gaelic? Okay, so I'm playing show tunes. So there's a big Broadway theme in here, and I'm man enough to say I listen to show tunes. So we get show tunes going, because I'm trying to, keep her up and light. And we go through Duxbury, and I'm flying, and I see a state cop. And I'm like, oh, shit. So I'm like, Katie didn't see it. My wife didn't see it. I see it. I'm looking in the rearview mirror. Luckily, we don't. If we get pulled over, we're missing that test, okay? So I drop Katie off. She takes the test. She passes. She's a nurse. She's up in Maine. She's my health care plan. So she gets in the car, and I go, Kate, that's awesome. I have good news and bad news. The good news is the test is over. Whatever happens, happens. The bad news is I have a great idea for my next book, and it's coming right at you. I'm like, you're my Katie. So what I did was, that was kind of the inspiration for my Garlic and Gaelic. What I started thinking was, what would have happened if we got pulled over? So this is a story of how decisions change your life. So I'll read you the back cover is, so I have the cop pull us over, so I make him the Italian. Finally, I get to go to Italy, okay? So this is the back cover. When East Boston's Antonio, Domenicio, Riccardo, Maximilianos, Presto di Giovanni meets Charlestown tough Margaret, Catherine, Philomena, Coventina O'Shaughnessy for a combined total of 39 syllables, they have no idea how their lives are intersected. Richie and Mary Kate both live in a world where things should have been, but one simple decision changed the whole trajectory of their lives. So what I did was, I'm not giving anything away, this all happens at the beginning. I started thinking, what if it happened, okay? So what if this cop pulled us over? And what if I'm like, man, we're just trying to get to, we got to take this test. Come on. And the guy's just angry. And he's like, screw you, I'm giving you a ticket. And I'm like, well, what made him angry? Why was he in a bad mood that day, right? So now she misses the test. Now, the great thing is, as an author, I can do anything I want. So I'm like, screw you. I have him hit by a car and he loses his leg. That's on page 2. So what happens is, he pulls her over. She misses the test. After she leaves the thing, he gets hit by a car. And now we fast forward 10 years. She's not a nurse. She's a home health aide. She ends up taking care of Richie's father in East Boston, Antonio Presto di Giovanni. And they don't know that they're each other's reason for where they are in life. He lost a leg. He can't be a state cop. Now she's a home health aide. For me, it was a really nice circle of there's all this give and take of do they fall in love, don't they, are they right for each other? But what was really fun was taking that Irish and mixing it in with a little Italian. Because so now I've got my 4 grandparents are all from 4 different parts of the world. but the maternal sides are Sicily and Galway. And then they fight. But so I'd already done all the Irish. I'd emptied the tank. But I'm like, I get to do Italian now. So I'm like, this is great. So I have a scene in here where Mary Kate now, she's the home health aide, she gets invited to Sunday dinner. And for me, it was like a really nice way to write, because that was a tradition we always used to do. Sort of a lost tradition now, because my grandparents are gone and my mom's 96. But we had Sunday dinner every week at my grandmother's house. So I have this scene in here where Mary Kate, the tough Irish from Charlestown, gets invited to Sunday dinner. And it is just noise and women with big hair from Medford. And they're all named Maria. And they're putting cheese on everything. They're sprinkling cheese on the ice cream and on the furniture. And it was a really fun scene. And so, it was a nice way to see the Irish and Italian kind of mixing here. So, does anyone here know what an Irish goodbye is, or an Irish exit? It's when you just leave a party. You don't say goodbye, you just leave, okay? So I have this scene in here at the end of the lunch, at the end of the Sunday dinner. So the definition of an Irish goodbye or an Irish exit is when you abruptly leave a party without telling anyone. Mary Kate did her best, but she got caught putting on her coat, and then she had to spend the next hour explaining how she had plenty of food at home and was all set for leftovers. Here's the difference. This is the Italian goodbye. Ho, ho, where are you going? She's leaving. You just got here. Take some of this home. I'm all set, thank you. You didn't like it? I loved it. She didn't like it. Then take some more. I'll get you a container. I'm good. Get her a container. Here, you're going to want this for later. Are you okay to drive? Is she okay to drive? She only had wine. Her arms are loaded with plastic containers, homemade wine, and 3 small potted tomato plants. We'll see you next week. Please God, if we're all still alive. Everyone makes the sign of the cross. That's the Italian goodbye. The Irish goodbye. Where's Uncle Mike? Oh, he left 3 hours ago. So that was fun for me to kind of dive into the Irish and the Italian. It was a nice way to bring those cultures together. I mean, all my stories are about family and about faith and about lost faith, maybe lost love and then kind of finding it at the end. But we're all the same. It didn't matter. I mean, the Italian, the Irish, it doesn't matter. I've got African-American and Spanish in the crossing guard, and it's just how we all navigate these relationships, right? We all navigate the relationships. So that was my Charlestown. And I went into Charlestown. I knew Dorchester and Southie best. What was fun was I was invited to Bunker Hill. There was a Bunker Hill Monument Day last year. So I was invited to present Garlic and Gaelic. And there's this real division in Charlestown. I mean, they're everywhere, right? Southie and Dorchester. But Charlestown, where you've got these triple-deckers that were sold for multi-million dollars, right? Each floor is now a multi-million-dollar condo. But then you got the old guard that are not giving up. And they are the tough. They're the ones that hang out at the Encore Casino, and they're just like, I ain't leaving. I'm going feet first. And they're staying in that house. It's the kids, the mother, and the grandmother on the 3rd floor, closest to heaven. And it's just, I loved it. I loved it. So I've got Mary Kate's mother is tough. A lot of my style is very similar to like Dennis Lehane. He's a Dorchester guy that wrote Mystic River and all. But he described her as a first ballot Hall of Fame tough Irish broad. And I'm like, I got that. This is Edwina. But then the grandmother on the 3rd floor is just the light of everybody's life. She's wonderful. So that was my kind of trilogy. And the last thing I like to share is I wrote this book last summer. And I like to share this story with everybody. So this is just this is again Irish. I'm always going to there's something about the Irish. Like they can get away with anything. I got this guy, Chris Connors, the obituary, and Michelin, like, just because you say it in a brogue, you can get away with a lot. So I write this Irish story about an Irish bar down the Cape. I live in West Yarmouth now, so there's like the Skipper Pub and Captain Parker's, and it was just they're trying to save their bar. It's all fictional. But I share that with you because this picture So my dad worked in a factory in South Boston. And he worked 6 days a week. Saturdays, he'd get out a little early. But for 2 weeks in July, we would rent a house down the Cape. So every night, he would drive to the Cape, and he'd get down there around 5, 6 o'clock. And he'd go in the house, and he'd pour himself a glass of scotch. And he would say, give me 2 fingers, but these 2 fingers. Not these 2. Give me 2 fingers of scotch. And he would put 2 ice cubes in the glass. And then we'd walk to the beach, and he'd put the glass up on a fence post. And then he would go for a swim, and he'd do 3 laps. He was very regimented, my old man. And then he'd come out of the water, and he would say, now the scotch is perfect. The ice had melted, now it's perfect. Now, I share that with you because I had to recreate that picture. And this is how dedicated I am to my audience, my readers. I had to drink so much scotch to get the perfect amount. I got a little more scotch, then I drink a little, then I pour a little more scotch in. That's why the picture is really fuzzy. I thought it was really clear. I woke up the next day and I'm like, oh, Jesus, I'm not doing that again. But that's on Lewis Bay, and that's kind of my dad's story. But yeah, that was it. I've written, I think, 7 books. I did a stage play musical. I'm not singing. And I've optioned off 3 of them that may or may not be made. I think Crossing Guard has the best chance. I got called on Garlic and Gaelic from Hallmark, but I'm like, this is Charlestown, man. This is not Hallmark people. If you read this book, the opening line, you'll know right away what you're dealing with. Okay, so it's just fun for me. I love getting the stories out there. I do these a bunch of times. I think everybody appreciates the characters. Like, I've had people read this, they're like, were you at my house on Sunday dinners? Like, it's just, they're all the same. They're all fun. But anyway, thank you all very much. I have some available here, and they're all available on Amazon. And I appreciate this picture of me really young. So if you have questions or you want to take a look, thank you very much.